Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of the Truth. I'm going to start this. I probably won't post it till tomorrow, and there'll probably be more added on to this, but just watching Sky News now before I go to bed, and I mean, sometimes you feel lucky for the country you're born in, but imagine if you weren't. Imagine if you were the same person, but you were born in another country, like Lebanon, or North Korea, or Israel, or Palestine, or someplace where, you may be peace-loving if you haven't been, remember, we're all brainwashed by the society that we're within, and that frames us. And so at the end of the day, what is actually us, I suppose, is the question, because we're just other people's thoughts regurgitated. But imagine if you weren't lucky to be in a place where there's no war, where there's no strife all the time, and you're in a residential block. You don't know that, or maybe you do know that there are terrorists above you or underneath you, and you get struck, and then you're inside a building on a phone begging people to come and find you, your family injured, or being kidnapped in Israel or whatever. This is the world we live in. It's so horrible. I'm just going to play in this bit. I think first is the Elder Hakim just talking about the situation. There's bombing going on in Lebanon. They're talking about Israel has told the US that they're going into Lebanon. I mean, I don't know what's going on, It just seems like now that countries are just like Russia do it now, Israel do it, America does it. Just go into other people's countries and drop bombs on, or claim there's a terrorist, and then you can just go in. That's what Russia did, and that was their claim for going into Ukraine. Now Israel seems to be doing the same thing. It's like the fabric of morality is falling apart. Anyway, listen to this.
I'm just going to take you back now to northern Israel, where our camera is capturing the heavy artillery that is currently taking place. Now, Israel, as I've said, have not confirmed the developing situation, although there are reports that they have told the United States that they will launch a ground incursion. But let me just show you these images that we've captured from northern Israel. Sound of heavy artillery there, and both the Lebanese media say that they can hear it coming in, and our teams who are there on the ground, Deborah Haynes was telling us a little earlier, and we could see the artillery going out just behind her, the sound of it. So things dramatically escalating, although Israel hasn't confirmed that ground offensive has begun, but they have, according to our sources and contacts and colleagues at NBC, they've said that US officials have been informed of this. Let's get the very latest from my colleague Alex Crawford.
The Israeli forces have been massing on Lebanon's southern border for days, pointing to an ever closer ground incursion. And the defense minister gave one of the clearest hints yet when he visited his troops hours before.
This is your mission. We will employ all that is needed. Your forces, other forces, from the air, from the sea, and also from the land.
Israeli artillery is shelling targets so intensely along the border that UN peacekeepers who we travelled with just a few weeks ago told us they're unable to patrol because of the security situation, although they remain in position. According to US media, Israeli special forces are already inside Lebanon, carrying out reconnaissance raids. And Sky News understands Lebanese army troops are repositioning along the border. That's being read by many that an incursion is pretty much underway. Explosions have been seen in southern Lebanon. And as more Israeli troops were spotted gathering on the border, the IDF declared 3 villages a military zone, another indication troops may be on the move or about to be. In the first Hezbollah speech since the killing of their leader, the militant group signaled they're ready for any ground battle.
We're prepared if the Israelis decide to enter by land. The resistance forces are ready for a ground engagement.
The lead up to this point has been bloody and violent. We watched rescue workers searching for survivors hours earlier at a site where it's hard to believe there once stood two multi-storey residential blocks, packed full of families, many of them displaced. There've been some remarkable tales of survival. The rescuers took a long and painstaking 4 hours to bring out this man. They've located many of those trapped by their shouts for help despite being buried. This young man, his face bloodied, live streamed his cries for help. "My brother and I are trapped," he's saying. "Please help. I don't know where my mother and father are." He gave an exact location. He and his brother somehow survived. His parents didn't, along with more than 40 others in the single most deadly Israeli attack so far. That sound is the first apartment block coming down after residents say they heard 3 Israeli airstrikes. You're about to see the adjacent second block collapse. Both were filled with families who'd already fled the bombings further south. The Israeli forces say their attacks are aimed at dismantling Hezbollah's military infrastructure, weaponry and strike capabilities. It's viewed very differently by Lebanese people on the ground. This is a literal massacre, this civil defense rescuer tells us. He spent all night pulling people out, including the young man in the video. "I've never seen anything like it," he goes on. "This is a war crime." For the first time this year, the Israeli forces hit central Beirut rather than its southern suburbs. This is a busy residential and transport intersection. The target, 3 leaders of a Palestinian faction based in Lebanon. The Israeli attacks appear to be widening in scope. The strike in the center of the capital is on top of multiple strikes down south as well as in the east of the country. Among those killed, the IDF said, was Lebanon's Hamas leader, also an employee of the UN refugee agency UNRWA. The number of dead from Israeli attacks in less than a fortnight now looks set to eclipse 34 days of war in 2006. Whatever the intended targets of these airstrikes, they are coming at enormous human cost. And to the Lebanese people across the country, the Israeli tactics and their consequences are making them feel this is rapidly turning into another Gaza. Those pulled out of the collapsed buildings are rare. 19-year-old Zainab somehow survived, but has a broken leg, broken hip, and 2 fractures in her shoulders. She doesn't know yet that her father, brother, and sister all died.
The Israelis targeting that building only means they want to scare us. They target civilians. But you should know we're not afraid. They can't scare us. And even if they try to kill us and maim us, we'll keep fighting.
The medical staff are frightened too, most afraid to be identified.
We've seen what the Israelis do in Gaza, and now it's our turn. They're not seeing any difference between civilians, medics, or fighters. They're criminals.
Hezbollah said it's responding to these strikes with what it called minimum effort, and it's ready for a long battle, whilst Western countries who are unable to broker an end to this are drawing mounting criticism.
We don't want anyone to get in our war, but all what we want is to stop supplying Israeli arms and Israeli defense forces, and as you see, this is the result. This is the result of the supplies.
Multiple entire families are being killed, 7 members in this one family alone. There's an overwhelming grief in Lebanon right now, as well as a growing humanitarian crisis, and the fear that this is going to get even worse. Alex Crawford, Sky News, in Sidon, in southern Lebanon.
Let's go straight to our Deborah Haynes, who joins me from northern Israel. And earlier, Deborah, we could see the artillery fire. We could hear it just behind you. Just tell us what's happening there now.
There's been a steady beat of artillery fire since we've been here in the last hour, and sometimes you can see orange flashes in the distance. Lebanon is about 5 miles or so over in that direction, and the artillery fire is clearly heading over there. We can also hear drones overhead. These are all the indicators that Israel is preparing for some kind of ground incursion if it hasn't already started.
Deborah, thank you so much.
So just to tab on to the end of that one, so it's the morning now and it has been confirmed that Israel have gone inside Lebanon and there's fighting going on. And I know that, I guess if you want to look at the other side, like why Israel may be doing this, I mean, I get the reasons, because they're claiming that there's 60,000 people on their borders that have had to leave because of since the Gaza, the 7th of October massacre, there's been fighting on the borders, so they've had to leave, and that's why negotiations have failed. So now that's why they're going in heavy-handed. And I get that point, that I can't imagine how it's like to live in Israel. Obviously I'm looking at it from a Westerner who's living in a country where there's no bombs, there's no alarms, there's no bunkers needed. So obviously I've got to think about that these people are living at threat all the time, and that's not a nice way. No one should be living that way. And that's a problem as well. These other countries around that, it's part of the system, isn't it? That they're bred to, we're all programmed in the surroundings that we find ourselves in. Because if you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't care about these things. You wouldn't want to fight your neighbour. But if you're born in a certain place, then this is your enemy and this is who you always will hate. And then it goes down and down and down and it never ends. This is all part of why I don't like the system of segregating humanity, and that's the problem with it, and that's what occurs. But in the system that we live within, I get it that they don't want their people to have to fear all the time and not have a good existence and have, be killed by bombs and etc. and have to leave their houses. I get all that point of view, but the problem is when you go in and then you're just dropping bombs indiscriminately, and I know they're saying, well, it's not indiscriminate, it's targeted, etc., but they are taking on because whenever, these buildings are usually, we're finding out these terrorists obviously are using bunkers or places underneath or near residential or protected areas because they don't have the firepower of the military to be able to protect themselves like states can. And I know that's against international law, and of course that's putting these people at risk, and that begs the question why the people are putting up with this, why the Lebanese are putting up with terrorists in their country. But the problem is if they've been programmed or grown up to believe that this is right and that's wrong, then that's why. We're all like that. Our belief systems are based on our parents and our peers and the people that are around us. We're no more virtuous just because, there's just it's happenstance, as it were. But the problem is that when you're going in and you're dropping a bomb, and you may kill 3 terrorists, heads of state or whatever, and stop the threat coming into your country, but if you then killed 100 or 1,000 innocent people, that are non-combatants, then that makes you lose the moral high ground. Same as when America lost, or the West lost moral high ground, what they did in Iraq and Afghanistan, Vietnam, etc. Maybe there's no war that has any moral high ground, because once you start killing human beings, that's a problem. It's a very messy, that's why we don't do it in the justice system, So I don't know, it makes Israel look the aggressor, because they're the most powerful in Lebanon and are not on if it was France that were doing all the terrorism, there's no way Israel would be going into France, because they know that there would be a difficult battle, the same way as America and the West. They don't go into China, but if it's somewhere in the Middle East, they will go in there because they know that, it's like they know have the higher power. And that is a form of sort of bullying in a way. It's that, you're using your opportunity that you're bigger than them. If it's equal to, you won't be doing it. That's why everyone's scared of Russia, everyone's scared of China, everyone's scared of Iran, because it's as it were, sort of a fairer fight. And that's where a country that may be doing things for a good reason or virtuous reason then can lose face, can lose morality, because it looks like, oh, you have so much firepower and you can do all this damage and kill all these innocent people and say, that, yeah, I'm sorry about that, but I have to get these terrorists. But it's not really the most clinical way, and it's not the way that it should be done, and that's the problem. And the problem is it also shows how you see those other people, that you can easily just drop a bomb that kills hundreds of innocent people to get one terrorist, like we've seen in Gaza. It's not just Israel, this is the West as well. This is because we still don't see each other intrinsically as the truth. We're all human beings. We see ourselves in these little boxes of you're American, you're Russian, you're Chinese, you're Israeli, you're Palestinian, you're Lebanese, you're whatever. And when we do that, it's easy for some people to then see them as, oh well, it doesn't matter if they get killed because they're not ours. Us versus them, as in the Pink Floyd song. And that's the problem. And that's where all this stems from. But the truth is, we're all human beings, and we all have families, and we all have hearts, and we all have feelings, and we all have this only one existence. And this is how we're choosing to fuck about with it. While these big boys sit in their bunkers getting other people to go die for them. Why people like terrorists blow indiscriminate people up. For what? For control, for power, for land. That's why they do it. None of them do it for justice or religion or God or any of those things. It's all about power, greed, and land. And that's the same with the big boys, the states as well, the world leaders. That's all they're interested in. Power, greed, and land. And the continuation of the status quo of whatever your country being the best it can be, better than the rest. That's the mentality. And that's why on this Pursuit of Truth I'm always talking about that. So yeah, I get from the point of view of why, I would hate to be living in Israel. I'd hate to be living in Lebanon. I'd hate to be living in Palestine or Gaza for the various different reasons. And it shouldn't be like that, because we're all human beings. And we're killing, ending existence, and especially from a religious aspect. Religion, the God-given spark of life. But even from a non-religious, we're human beings akin to each other with a one existence. And how many babies die because of war? How many innocent people die of war? Yeah, you get a few criminals, but you never get the same ratio. Even if you're trying to do it clinically. Then, because war is messy. And that's why we shouldn't do it. But again, the problem is from Israel's point of view, that argument would be, well, if we don't do anything, then they will just amass, because negotiations don't work. UN and all that stuff, it doesn't work. Because the problem is that everyone knows, because we created weapons, that's why, these negotiations always fail, because then they can start blowing each other up and scaring each other because of that. I don't know what the answer to this is, but take care, take it easy, God bless and peace.